Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the FareCompare Weekly Podcast, episode number 53. My name is Rick Cini. I'm the co-founder and CEO of FareCompare.
And I'm Ann McDermott. Actually, my title is editor, but what I really am is color commentator. And Rick is the brains of this operation. And today, among the other things that Rick is going to talk about, is 5 ways to cut travel costs by $50 to $300, or in some cases, a whole lot more. Plus, he's going to talk about cheap flights to Europe. And I'll tell you, listen to this podcast for that reason alone.
So after Ann yanks out her telestrator and makes sure that John Madden no longer has a job, we will also take a question from consumers. And one of my favorite things to do is always to answer some questions. Love to answer questions and also learn about our event of the week from our Adventurous app, which takes us to an odd place to celebrate a German staple. Let's talk a little bit about the 5 ways to cut costs. And we started off by saying, well, I want to cut costs by 50, and then even if I want to cut costs by $300 or more. So, you know, the 50 is kind of an easy one, and we always know what 50 means.
It means bag fee. Bag
fee.
$25
round trip. Now we have to say that Southwest doesn't charge a bag fee yet, and you know I hate to say yet because they haven't done it yet, but I think the handwriting's on the wall to some degree. So there's your first $50 to save. And then as you move up the scale of savings, it's all about comparing different price points. I know, you know, there's so many ways to compare airlines, stops, multi-carrier, but essentially once you compare all these different things, which will easily let you do on our site if you type in a search query, you can always save about $75 or more. And then, you know, I always get asked the same question, Ann, which is if there was one thing that you could do to save money on your next trip, I always say, here's 3. And one of them certainly is flying on the cheapest days.
And in all these, save $50, save $75, save $300, there's a whole bunch of examples, real life examples that we found on FareCompare. And I dutifully went back in and checked and make sure these are real airfares available for sale right at this moment, and they were. And so you will see the proof on how these savings tips really work. And most of us, I think, you know, when we go to the site, we just type in, I want to go from LA to New York, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'll just take that. Not even realizing that, you know, by doing one simple thing or taking like literally 10 extra seconds, you could have saved, you know, $100.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty amazing, actually. And really, it's about being flexible to some degree. And, you know, for those people, and when we talk about, you know, nearby airports and saving money from nearby airports, you know, the first thing that pops in my head is Fort Lauderdale, Miami, LA, with all the airports around there, including Santa Ana, Long Beach, Burbank. But really, I've just got through this past week doing some radio shows in Wisconsin. I mean, people will drive a couple hours from smaller cities in Wisconsin to Chicago, even sometimes into Minneapolis, in order to save many times $400 or $500, and sometimes $400 or $500 per person, not just for the entire itinerary for all the people on there. So I know it seems like, and even if you're, you know, driving a couple 2.5 hours or so, you can still save money from those alternate airports.
You spoke about saving as much as $500 per person. Gosh, that brings us to trips to Europe, and some of these prices are downright insane.
Yeah, you know, here's the weirdest thing about these trips here. You have a couple things going on. You have a couple of these low-cost transatlantic airlines. You have WOW, Norwegian Air, Aer Lingus, for example. There's also some Freedom with Air New Zealand flying from Vegas over to Europe, and then you've also got Emirates flying from New York into Europe. And so here's what historically what can control the prices to Europe was the quote unquote fuel surcharge. And we don't call it a fuel surcharge anymore. We call it a carrier imposed charge, and that's because fuel's cheap now. It was much easier to call it a fuel surcharge. We could blame it on oil companies. And then you have the parts that airlines don't control, which is a pretty hefty set of taxes, usually around anywhere from 150 to 170, depending on where you're going. So, and that fuel surcharge being sort of above 400, it's been sort of bounces around between 400 and 450. So you're looking at $600 round trip before you even start to charge for airfare. Some of these airfare on WOW and Norwegian are under $500 round trip. So they're below the historical taxes and norms for fuel surcharges. And they're driving down the price of other airlines, plus the fact that there's been some scares, in the past 8 months or so in Europe. So that certainly doesn't help. It's a slower time of year because it's fall time frame, flying into Europe. The dollar is strong, especially after Brexit in England. So, it's green light when we're talking about Europe. I noticed, if you look at the USA Today column we wrote, it's like, these are the prices that it used to be before 2008, 2009, when we saw prices to the wintertime to Europe. And that's good news, I guess, for consumers. This is the time to go, and especially fall, which is a great time to go right now. You're looking at September, Oktoberfest starting in September in Europe. And all the people that are in Europe are back from their August vacation, so you get the full flavor of Europe as well.
Well, I just wanted to say, in case anybody is wondering, these are not mistake fares. These are not weirdo fares.
Yeah, no, they're not.
But more than a week ago, or a little bit around a week ago, I saw a New York to Copenhagen for $393 round trip, $393. And as you pointed out, there's a lot that are under $500. I've seen Boston to Ireland, Chicago to Rome, and Paris. Well, how about this? Los Angeles to Paris for $540.
And by the way, a lot of those are on Dreamliners, which are the 787 of Boeing, which is being used on some of these routes. So those are just, I love when we see competition. It's just unbelievable pricing right now. And by the way, out of many cities in the country, domestic pricing for the fall is really inexpensive as well.
Yeah.
I listen to, a lot of times I listen to the airline analysts and each of the airlines have their call, or I go back and read the transcript. Clearly, price points are coming down. But these are coming off pretty high highs. So it doesn't look like airlines are going to have any trouble making any money as long as fuel prices are low.
Well, and also, you've noticed that there is a deadline people have to keep in mind, and that's the last day for departing on a jaunt to Europe would be December 19th, and then after that day, fares are going to rise.
Yeah, so there are always some magic dates when, unfortunately, for one person who flies on one day pays half, or not half, but sometimes 20 or 30% what the person above them, either more or less, depending on which way you're going. In this case, the last day to depart to Europe before the prices go up about 30% is the 19th of December and the 20th. And then, of course, that lasts for a fairly lengthy time into early spring, when in the first week of April, they start to rise back up again.
One last thing. What would you say to somebody who says, I don't want to go to Europe in the fall. It's cold. I won't like it.
Hey, look, I'm in Dallas. It was 100 degrees yesterday. It's supposedly the fall here, or it's getting darn close to the fall. I'm ready to go to Europe in the fall. If you're in the north and it's cooler weather, Spain is quite warm this time of year if you're worried about that. Perfect time to go, in my opinion. I have, as we've talked about before, on my wife's side, I have family that lives in Salzburg, Austria. So I've been to Europe literally several dozens of times. And my favorite time to go is in the fall. People are back from their vacations. The weather is broken, and it can be quite warm in places like Italy and Spain in the summertime. That great trip to July in Spain or in Italy can be quite warm. So perfect time to fly, in my opinion.
It can also be quite crowded. I'm sure you've stood in lines that just went on forever.
Yes. Yeah, so they don't have magic bands over in Athens for you to cut in line to see the Forum, for example. So yeah, so check that out. Great prices. If you can get away, it's definitely the time to do so. And now let's transition to, I haven't seen the actual question today, so maybe you can help me out. Who do we get the question from today?
I'll tell you, the question is right up your alley. It's from Pete in Milwaukee, and he says, in the spring of 2017, my wife and I will need to travel from Milwaukee to Austin, Texas. It's a wedding. And are we better off flying into Dallas, to Houston, or San Antonio, as opposed to Austin? I guess that's up for grabs too.
Yeah.
And then driving from there, or should we just search fares directly to Austin? So, Mr. Texas, tell us.
Yeah, I get to use at least I know the geography of Texas. So yeah, in this particular case, flying into Austin is perfectly reasonable. There may not be as many nonstops into Austin out of Milwaukee, and that's probably why they asked the question. First of all, they're shopping in the spring. It's a little early to be shopping. You're shopping too early at this point. It sounds like that you said March, right? Spring?
Just spring.
April.
That's all we know.
So yeah, so you want to buy that ticket after the first of the year, because that's when you'll see them start to manage those price points. So about 3 months out, 3.5 months, you want to start. Don't buy any later than sort of 1 month inside. Then you're playing in the airline's hand if you procrastinate inside a month before departure. Now, as far as flying into Austin, the connecting flights, if you do connect, you'll probably end up, and if you're flying out of Milwaukee, you may actually go Chicago, Austin. You may go Dallas, Austin. You may go Houston, Austin, depending on what part of, they say Wisconsin? Oh, from Milwaukee. Yeah, so out of Milwaukee. So depending on when those are, probably the price isn't going to be that much different between Austin and San Antonio. It doesn't hurt to look at the price. We talked about this earlier, having, a nearby airport. If in a family of 4 or 5, if you're saving, $70 or $80, I just don't expect that price point to be that big of a difference, especially if we see oil prices stay where they are currently. So I don't expect oil prices to jump dramatically anytime soon. So I would definitely be looking directly from Milwaukee to Austin. Likely the cheaper flights are going to be a few of the connecting ones, but your connection is going to be a very short connection. You can probably make that as tight as you want if you're going through Houston or Dallas or Chicago. Potentially, I guess you could be going through Minneapolis or Denver into Austin as well, depending on which airline you're taking.
Well, thank you, Pete. I hope you have a good time at the wedding. And if anybody else has a question for Rick, please send it to customer.service@faircompare.com, and Rick will help you out.
Yeah, so let's transition off to our, one of the funnest things too is reading through some of these events, and several events posted to the RV Adventurist app. You can pull that down on iTunes and Google Play and check that out. You can also see it on the website just by typing faircompare.com/adventurist. So be sure and download that app. But this one kind of caught my eye because I was first looking through it and it said Oktoberfest in October. And I'm like, really? I thought the Germans had it in September. And then I started reading on, and it turns out it's actually in Brazil. So we have one of the biggest festivals in Brazil. It turns out to be a German-based festival.
Gee, Rick, I'm kind of hoping that you're going to mispronounce the name so I don't have to.
Blumenau.
Okay.
I'm giving it my best shot. I actually have a couple of Portuguese speakers here, so if you do the Portuguese version of that, but we'll go with Blumenau for now.
Well, it's supposed to be wonderful. It's I guess it's sort of like between Sao Paulo and Porto Alegre.
Yeah, so it's the southern part of the region, and I mean, this is now Brazil has a lot of people in it, but over 600,000 people tend to from across the globe come to do this, and it dates back to the mid 1800s, and clearly there was a lot of migration going on from Europe in. Starting to come into the U.S. and clearly going into Brazil as well. And a lot of that culture made its way there and continues to at least have a couple weeks. I think it's a little over 2 weeks, the festival time frame from early October into mid to late October. So definitely going to check that out. I'm putting that on my bucket list because I've been to Oktoberfest several times, but I'm going to have to try the Brazilian version here shortly.
If you are fans of sausage and beer, please take note. I think you'll enjoy this.
Yeah, Brazil, I can guarantee you the sausage will be pretty good. And so last but not least, let's close up with remembering to download that Aventurous app. Give that a try. Come shop on FareCompare. Catch our podcasts every week. You can also catch all sorts of articles we write, USA Today, Fox News, ABC News. Check those out as well. So please do that and come to FareCompare. Check out our blog every day. It gets updated every day. And then we'll hope you see you for episode number 54 next week.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Andy.